So today we're talking about dynamics in the workplace.
For people who have bad bosses and colleagues, it can be toxic and depressing. There are times where you don't have to do anything to have people gossip about you, and they will automatically paint you.
Ego's a big thing, मैंने किया है, मैं ही हूँ, right? So all of that.
Can you really have like a really good friend in your office?
There are a lot of people who are, they're at work, and then after that they're working out at gyms together. They're playing sport together. They actually develop hobbies together.
Another thing she brought up is language. The weaponization of language in an organization.
There've been cases where I have encouraged people, not to be drinking together. Because sometimes the side that comes out of someone, after they've had a few drinks can be quite different.
If you're in a company where you're not happy, have a chat with somebody who will listen to you and will either guide you or will address the issues that you have.
So welcome back to Love Rollercoaster. This is episode number 9 and I am your co-host Gaurav Bhagat.
And I'm Rinalini.
So today we're talking about dynamics in the workplace, and this truly gets interesting. I know at your place of work, you have some experiences and some stories to share, and well, you are totally gonna relate. For me, your organization could be a small organization, your organization could be a super large organization, but my belief is that in the workplace, dynamics get interesting as soon as you have the second person join. So even amongst two people, there can be situations, and we're going to have a chat around that, right? So what do you have for us today?
So how many of you have that feeling of dread on Sunday evenings? That pit in your stomach that tells you that you're really not looking forward to going to work on Monday. So you'd be surprised. It happens to more people than you think. In an average person's lifetime, you spend 1/3 of your life in office or at work, and that is 90,000 hours. For people who have bad bosses and colleagues, it can be toxic and depressing. And for people who have good bosses and colleagues, it can be productive and fun. In this episode, let's talk about all the scenarios that, we have spoken to people about. And we'll give you an idea of what goes on in offices all across the world and in our own. And I'm sure you'll be able to relate to a lot of this. And then in an office, you have 3 tiers. You have entry-level employees, you have mid-management, and then you have the top management. So let's talk about the dynamics over here. We have, our team has collated quite a few stories and anecdotes from people, their friends. So let's get into some of those, where you have like a lot of people who have just started work and what they're experiencing.
Sure. Sounds like a plan. And it's interesting where you mentioned that, some people will have that feeling of dread in their stomach on a Sunday night. For me, it's on a Saturday evening saying that, oh my God, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. So it's interesting, but I think that's also because, of the kind of equation and culture that, I have with everyone. So maybe that's one reason. But yeah, let's jump into...
But you run your own company. You're not reporting to somebody else, right? So that's a completely different dynamic there altogether.
True that, but,
and you love what you do.
Of course. But we have gone from one person, which is me, to now having 80 plus people.
But you've still always been the boss. The boss's boss's boss.
A good boss.
Right? So yeah, let's talk about some of the anecdotes that we've had.
All right, so let's take an example, okay? And first, let's start with the lower tier. Like Mrinalini said, there are 3 tiers. Let's start with the lower one. We're talking about interaction, between colleagues. And an interesting story, came up in our research, and this was at an organization where this new person joined this company. He was from a minority community, in terms of a minority religious community, and all of a sudden he found himself being singled out. There were remarks that were being passed, there was things that were being said about his religion and his preferences of food, etc. as well. And while this person came in with a lot of enthusiasm, early on, obviously it started, to impact him, and we could see a dip that was happening, in terms of their, productivity and, what they brought to the table. The energy levels were lower, and obviously it was beginning to hurt. So I'm sure many of you actually faced this, in your organizations or heard of this as well. Your thoughts on, a situation such as this happening in the workplace?
So you have a host of dynamics that are in play, There is, picking on someone for just being different. There's picking on someone for not conforming to the normal. There's picking on someone for their race, their caste, their religion.
Sure.
Sometimes you have gossips and people who just like to make people's lives miserable. So you have every office has a bunch of people like that. And birds of a feather, they flock together. So you'll find all the gossips hanging around each other, talking about this one, that one, making life really uncomfortable for the people they're talking about. And they take great pleasure in that. And we've all faced it. Anyone who's had a job has faced it. Okay. So another thing nowadays is digital harassment, right? So there was an instance where one of our team members spoke to their friends and came out with this story where this person was not a part of any group in the office. And the rest of them formed a WhatsApp group and started, talking about him on that, making fun of him. And he knew that was happening and they were looking at him and smiling and, pointing to him. I mean, it was very obvious that they were talking about him. And the other thing is that, you take photographs of people and you have memes of them and, that starts circulating and that's just wrong. So that's one of the things that have happened. The other thing is that, somebody else had said that, there's this person who got his friend into the organization. And then that friend became very good friends with the manager. Then the manager promoted him to assistant manager. And within 3 months, he got that friend who got him fired.
Yep.
So this is, like biting the hand that feeds you literally. And this is something that happens a lot.
Of course.
So, no good deed goes unpunished sometimes,
Yeah.
So what do you do in these cases?
So I think this is something that does happen, and you have a lot of people who might be very good at their work, but they may not be very good at communicating, what they've been doing, and projecting themselves, in a positive manner amongst managers and leadership. And then you have someone who's kind of not really doing the best, but his or her PR skills are fantastic. And hence they're always going out there and they're always, I won't say like sucking up to the boss, but they're going out there and they're projecting themselves in such a way like they're doing everything and the other person's not. And I just think that as a manager, a leader, maybe even if you think this person's your friend, you just need to be a little mindful and careful. So that's something you need to be thinking about.
Do you really have friends in office? Can you really have a friend in office?
I'm sure. There's many instances where great friendships have been formed.
Yeah, but isn't there some sort of competition that does come up with colleagues? Like, can you really have like a really, really good friend in your office?
I mean, I've known cases where people have met at work and eventually gone ahead and even started like dating or even got married and stuff. So I'm sure it does happen.
I'm talking about a friend, not a romantic.
So even as a friend, I'm sure why not? There are a lot of people who are they're at work and then after that they're working out at gyms together. They're playing sport together. They actually develop hobbies together. So I'm sure it does happen. I mean, it's not that it's not. I mean, sometimes as someone in a position of leadership, I may have respect for someone, but will I socialize with them? I mean, probably not, right? So I would probably draw a line at a particular point, but there are people I think, who have created good friendships and continue to do so. So I think another one that people have to be very mindful of is the fact that, when you come in, and you could be a guy or a girl at an organization, and when you come in and you're trying to be, very pally or very friendly, and you might be perceived in a way as someone who's, maybe flirtatious, someone who might be typecast as, someone who's making, who's trying to be too friendly with, a colleague of the opposite, sex. And I think that can have, repercussions as well, because A, it'll get people, talking, one. B, it'll also perhaps, get you typecast in a particular manner where, again, it can have an impact on your work.
But there are times where you don't have to do anything to have people gossip about you, and they will automatically paint you as someone who's too friendly with boys or too friendly with girls. You don't have to, you just have to be normal. You have to be just friendly with everybody, and you will still get typecast. Because this is where people's insecurities, their jealousy, that gossip, that nature to gossip comes in. the angle comes in. Because I'll give you an experience
Sure.
that I faced.
Mhm.
Okay. There are all kinds of toxic people, okay, and they don't need any excuse. So when I joined work in my second year, there was this new fellow who got hired in Delhi. He comes down to Bombay for one evening and he goes back and but he tells everybody in Delhi and everybody else who he speaks to that I'm having an affair with the boss.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I found out 3 years later when I moved to Delhi, and then some colleagues, we became pals. And then I was told that this is what he'd been saying about me. Now, I didn't know what to say. Like, should I go and give him two tight slaps? Because that's really what I wanted to do and scream at him. But I decided not to say anything. I decided to just let it go because it's been a while and why bring it up and bring this whole thing up, and it's embarrassing. It's uncomfortable. And the funny part is I'm sure it got back to the boss because I did feel a kind of awkwardness in our interactions at some point. And then when I found this out, I was like, oh God.
Yeah, but I think this probably also does come from a deep feeling of I don't know, like insecurity or
No, it's just a
poor
horrid human
upbringing,
being.
or just some situation at home. Like, why would someone actually go ahead and do
I
stuff
don't
like
know.
that?
Some people are just horrible.
Mm.
There was him, and then he moved to the Mumbai office, and he and this girl and these few other guys, they got together and created like this snake pit. It was awful. It was awful, and that entire 2001, I think, was my worst year in office because there are years where nothing works out for you. Like 2000, when I joined, I was doing well. I was getting like stories that were coming on top, and things were going really well for me. And then 2001, everything I tried to do didn't work out.
Sure.
There were people, there were stories I was pursuing, nobody. There were like some days where I made about 45 calls, not one person answered.
Mm.
Do you have those years? Like, do you
Yeah.
have those, you know? And then the minute 2002 came about, everything
changed.
started falling into place.
Mm.
And in that 2001, I went through this. And then I went through these people who would talk about me and, oh my God, she doesn't deserve this job because I learned everything on the job. Oh, she doesn't deserve this job. Oh my God, everything I did was, dissected. It was talked about, and they were, just so toxic. And the funny part is that you knew they were talking about you. And
Sure.
sometimes they did it. This one woman, she would, I still remember we were walking out of the office, and she's like, some people are so stupid and they don't know how to do this. And I knew that she was talking about me. And she's saying it in front of my face. I looked at her and I was like, again, I thought to myself, should I respond? If I respond, she'll be like, who says we're talking about you? So, and if I don't respond, I pretend that, I
Didn't hear
actually
it.
don't
Mm.
care.
Sure.
But, it carried on like that. And there were people who I was friends with, and they would come and tell me, oh my God, these people are saying this about you, that about you, this, that. I just realized that I'm above all of this.
Sure.
And yes, things are not working out for me now. But the good thing is that I had a supportive boss. And that year, I actually got tuberculosis because I got ill. Because A, things were not working out. So I was very upset about not being able to perform. And B, all of this going on, it had some kind of impact.
100%.
I got tuberculosis of the lymph node, and for which I had to have surgery after some time, But so it does affect you.
Of course.
Sometimes it affects you mentally, like people get into a depression, and sometimes it affects you physically. You get all sorts of illnesses, from being in a toxic work atmosphere.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, eventually you did have a choice, a choice to, leave, a choice to move out, etc. But for so many people, there is no choice. I mean, they have to, just suck it up because I mean, we all know, like, what's really happening with the economy today and the kind of, opportunities that are there. And sometimes you could just go possibly like from the frying pan into the fire. So there's no guarantee that, the next place you go to, will it be any better or will it actually be worse? I think the interesting and the good part is that you do have, things like the POSH Act in place. okay, and the POSH, which is the prevention of sexual harassment. I mean, if that act is in place and it is actually something that is, followed, and there is redressal of a complaint that goes there, I think that can go a long way in addressing this, which probably wasn't there in 2001.
So it doesn't have to be sexual harassment, right? It can be just toxic work behavior where people are talking about you, saying negative things, gossiping, generally spreading negativity all around, which really affects everyone's performance. But I think the reason I stuck on was my boss was very supportive. Like I didn't tell him anything that was going on or whatever.
Sure.
But there would be people who were like, but why are you giving her the market story to write? She doesn't know how to do it. He was like, if I don't give it to her, how will she ever learn? So as a result, he would support me and he would haul me up whenever
Right.
I slipped up or I wasn't performing. I would get hauled up. But, in a really nice way.
Fair.
Like it wasn't in a way that would demean me or make me feel like crap because, I wasn't performing. It'd be like, maybe do this, maybe do that, instead of saying, why did you do this? Why did you do that? One time I messed up really badly with a client and, I got some stuff wrong in the story. And he just came to me and he was like, next time, just let me know when something like this happens. So even if, the boss that you have or your manager makes all the difference, in this. And then when you do go and talk to them about your grievances, the fact is that if they hear you and they say, yes, I've heard you, we're going to do something about it. And if you feel that you're supported by them, it's fine.
Yeah.
So, toxic colleagues you can handle. But if you have a bad boss, that's another thing altogether. That's much harder.
Of course. Yeah. And I think, there has to be a redressal of your complaint. I mean, if something is popping up, it can't be just brushed under the carpet, right? Because otherwise what's going to happen is that one day it's just going to explode and blow up and it's going to have consequences, for, the team, the organization, and it pulls everyone down.
Why don't you give us some examples of how you've, addressed issues when they've come up with certain people?
Sure. So a lot of stuff that's happened, for me when, and of course, times have changed as organization structures, have also changed. So there have been times where it could be as simple as someone in a particular function doing a particular role, reaching out to the manager repeatedly for help, and it just not being addressed. And as a result, this person found his productivity was dropping, and then came back and said that I just need to step down because it's not working out for me. And again, when this person did come in, his intention was to do the role well, but things were just being aligned by the manager in a way where they were just not letting him perform adequately. And I think that kind of eventually just was not being addressed, and it came to a situation where that person went and resigned. So I think things like that have happened, a couple of times. And of course, once we found that happening, we realized there is a problem that has to be addressed. So that was something that was done.
So how did you address it?
I always say that the first option is always, the reboot. Okay, get them to, like reboot. But in case that's not happening, then unfortunately it might lead to the boot, which is time for them to go. So reboot or boot, that really is what it is. And I think there's only that much rope that you can give that much leeway that you can give someone. I'm talking about even, a senior manager. If it's not working out and they're not aligning, then it's time, to basically let them go.
Yeah. So now let's take on the role of the boss and the boss-employee dynamic. When you're somebody's manager, you have a huge part to play in whether that person thrives or feels defeated, right? I've got a few anecdotes. Okay, so I spoke to a couple of people.
Sure.
One person is in a fairly senior position in one of India's biggest companies. She's the head of department.
Sure.
So she was saying that, her colleagues, she said there was her ex-manager who used to look at her and get completely threatened by her in a way. And she would get comments like, oh, but she's driving a fancy luxury car and I'm not. And then she would come to her and say, your son is just automatically good. You don't know anything about parenting.
Yeah.
Your son is naturally good. So you've done nothing for him. And what do you know about the kids these days? They're all into gadgets and this and that. She's like, what do you mean? You're just dismissing my parenting by just saying that, oh, everything that's happened to you and all the good that's in your son is all a fluke. So things like that she would say in office. And then she's the only woman head of department and the rest are all men.
And that's
And
not
then
going to
you
be easy, right? I mean,
No,
there's going to be
that
even
is
more judgment on many counts then.
so this ex-boss was a single woman. She was a divorcee and she was quite bitter about life. So she would come to office and she would say, people should never get married. What is the point in getting married? It's such a useless thing. There's no need to get married. You should just have a relationship, live in relationship and don't get married. It's too much of a problem and it never works. So there are some people, like some of the men, to suck up to her. They would be like, oh yeah, if we had met you earlier, we wouldn't have got married either. She was like, come on, are you serious? And they were like, we have to say these things to her.
And the guys in the office, though they would probably internally not agree with her, but just to score marks and points, they would probably like, oh, yes, ma'am, you're so right. And they're probably throwing their spouses or girlfriends under the bus as
Oh
well.
yeah, and she was also saying, like the kind of stuff they say about their wives, it's horrendous. She's like, if their wives knew what they were saying about them, they'd be horrified. I mean, this is that whole, legion of men who find it pride and joy in putting down women and making fun of their wives and, those wife jokes, derogatory wife jokes. So all of these were happening over there. And I mean, so you have those things also happening. Another thing was that, you can make people's lives miserable, right? She says one head of department, she would pick on him every single morning meeting. She would pick on him. There's some people who can handle it, and there's some people who can't handle it. So she says one HOD, he would be like, yeah, I just taken it from one year and I get it out of the other. And there was another one who she would pick on and humiliate him all the time. He had a mild heart attack because he couldn't take it. So this is another aspect, where if you have a shitty boss, it makes your life miserable.
Yeah.
And, it's up to an individual to have the strength to handle toxicity and, this onslaught of negativity towards you.
Sure. We are aware like there's a science behind this as well, right? In terms of the dynamics, between people and all of that as well. And it is called DISC. So you'll have different people respond differently in different situations, right? So, I mean, you'll have the dominants, right? And the people who are, very aggressive, like when say muh fat, jo muh mein aata hai, matlab bol dete hain. So you have one set of people, who'd be like that. You have the eyes who are, very influenced, very driven by the heart. And these are people, who want to connect with you. They want to have a conversation with you. They want to ask, how the parents, how's the family, how's the kids, how's the weather, everything under the sun. Then you have like the S's, very steady. And for them, everything goes, right? They can take a lot of, let's say crap, and they can also, take a lot of, pushback, etc. So very steady, very supportive, they're yes people. And then you have the conscientious, the people who are very driven by, their brains and their research and everything. So the point being that when people are evaluating their bosses, I think it's important for them to see, which bucket they kind of fall into, and even the kind of person, they are. And as far as possible, I mean, if you have someone who is a very high D, okay, and you're someone who's very emotive, like very high I, it's a cocktail for disaster, right? Because that person will come in such a way because they're like going aggression, numbers, targets, and we've seen it. Like there've been videos that have come on, even on Instagram of big banks where the boss is like smashing the hell out of the people in terms of language and everything else. And high D, obviously very target driven, and then you have someone on the team who's a high I, who's so emotion driven and is like taking all this in and saying, what the hell, where have I come into? And hence there's just it's like conflict and then they kind of move apart. So I think that's, those dynamics are very important. And I think a lot of organizations are using psychometrics to even understand that is there compatibility, in teams or not.
Yeah, but when you're talking about how a boss behaves with, you would expect that somebody who's reached a position like that, that high a position, would have some degree of maturity and some sort of decency, right? You're not expected to be, in your 30s and 40s to be screamed at like you're a child.
Yeah.
Right? And you've got children of your own. And that person is screaming at you and humiliating you and, calling you
Yeah.
ridiculous adjectives.
Yeah.
And you're like, why do I need to take this? But then you
course.
stick on because you've got a family to feed, you've got kids' schools fees to pay, you've got home loans to pay.
Of course.
So
Yeah,
you're stuck.
you have economic compulsions and you also have psychological compulsions. There's some people who do it for the money, and there's some people who like, log kya kahenge? If I don't have a job, if I lose my job, what are people going to say? What are my parents going to say? So it's also like, the emotional and psychological compulsions. But I'll also tell you where a lot of this comes from. Okay, and we both went to a boarding school, and in that boarding school, I mean, I'm going back now to even when people are 11, 12, 13. So the kind of catalyst and where this all begins, and we had a prefect, and his only reason for beating us up or being mean to us was the fact that his prefect did it to him when he was in class 7, when we were in class 7. So similarly, what happens even in the workplace, you have dynamics where, अरे मेरे बॉस ने तो मुझे ऐसे किया था तो मैं भी तुझे ऐसे करूंगा, right? So it's almost like something that's, it's just passing on until someone decides, hey, this has to stop, right? And it has to come from the top. It just has to, a line has to be drawn, and it just has to come from the top.
Do people actually complain when things like this happen, right? Do they go above their boss's head and go to his boss or somebody more senior? Because I think sometimes when you do that, it does get addressed if the company values you, right? So when I was working, we had two really undesirable bosses. One used to favor everybody from one city, and it became a point of contention. And after a while, the company realized, and people would complain. Things that we would do, we would get pilloried for, and things they would do, it'd be like, oh, everything's so great and all that. And then that caused a hell of a lot of resentment, and then people complained and they demoted him.
Right.
And then we had another guy who was so awful. He would scream at everybody. And, he took a fully functioning, solid reporting team and he just demoralized everybody so badly.
Sure.
He would treat us like children. He would separate our seats. He actually rejigged the entire seating chart.
Right. Yeah.
And here you're in your late 20s, 30s, and some people are in their 40s, and they're being told where to sit in an organization. And he would call people in the middle of, you're in a press conference, and he would call people and scream at them for something that they haven't done, and it throws you off balance completely. And he was rude. And he would make so many mistakes himself.
Right.
And you're like, what the hell is this? Yeah. And people complained about him so much that, okay, he was let go. I mean, I think within a year, he said that I'm pursuing opportunities elsewhere. And oh my God, you should have seen the rejoicing that happened.
Right. Yeah.
But it was all because everybody, called the higher manager and was like,
of course,
this is what's happening. We are being demeaned. We are being screamed at for things that are not our fault. And, we had that ability to express ourselves.
Right.
They gave us that voice, which is
yeah.
good.
And see, the thing is, this is a large multinational organization, right? So obviously there is different structures. There is different let's say ways of reaching out, and escalations when they come up at one point they have to be addressed.
Yeah.
Enough people are saying it. Obviously, there's a problem and something has to be done. Yeah. But there's
in
a lot of organizations.
Like yours also, right?
Of course.
It's the same.
We do. We have the grievance committee. We have the POSH committee. And again, if someone does reach out, HR, I think our HR is also very very on the ball, and they'll escalate and they'll bring it to a thing where, okay, then I'll get involved and I will solve it, right? I think that's something that we do a lot. But there are a lot of organizations where none of this exists, and people like, suck it up, that person's a good person, just make do. It's your problem, it's not their problem. So there are places where that happens, as well. So yeah, I think that again, it boils down to the kind of leadership that is really there, and how actively will they actually go ahead and pursue. But again, maybe 90% of companies, will possibly not have, such recourse. So, and if they do, if their channels are there, and if someone does go ahead and rat, they'll be like, okay, why are you complaining? And I'm going to make your life even more miserable, etc., etc. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
I was talking to this other person, and she is she's at the head of her team. And she was saying that it's a very interesting thing with managers who don't acknowledge your work. She brought up a very interesting point. She says, you are giving your 100%. You're giving 200%, right? You have been given a task. You have completed the task. You have excelled in that task. But you're not getting any credit or recognition for what you have done. And when it comes to talking about it, it's you have led the team that has performed so superbly and under your guidance, but you're not given any mention at all. It's like diluted acknowledgement. So that is actually quite demoralizing. And so if you're a consistent overachiever, she says you're taken for granted because, oh, this person is capable of doing this. But somebody who operates at 80%, if they've gone up to 90%, they're like, wow, oh my God, you did this. So it's actually, for some bosses, they will actually reward an underperformer who does a little bit extra rather than an overachiever or an outperformer who's consistently hitting or surpassing targets.
Sure.
So that's another point that one needs to look at. And I think she said that she did confront her and she said that this is an issue. And then, okay, she got like, oh, my bad. I will think about it. So sometimes I think it's unintentional and it needs to come to their notice. So sometimes it is intentional.
Right. I think also the other fact that comes into play is that sometimes you have managers and bosses who steal a lot of credit for the work that's done by the people who are, let's say, their reportees. And I do see this happening in a lot of organizations that I consult and train with as well. So there too, I see this happening where a lot of the work that's been done by the juniors, credits being taken by a manager or a senior leader, and there is no recognition that's happening for those lower downs. So I think that's another red flag, because at some point it's going to be frustrating for people in the team, and they'll be like, okay, this just isn't working anymore.
It's so prevalent. And this all comes down to insecurity. It comes down to ego. It comes down to envy. And I don't know what is going on in somebody's head when they decide not to acknowledge somebody's hard work, what is going on in somebody's head when they decide to take credit for somebody's work. I think it's a combination of all of this, or it's just megalomania. I don't know.
Yeah. So in fact, I'll give you the E through I on this one. Okay. So E, of course, like you said, is the ego. So the ego is a big thing. Maine kya hai, main hi hu, right? So all of that. So that's the E. The F is actually the fear. Okay. And the fear would be from the perspective that, okay, if I, don't keep showing up, or if I don't keep taking credit, I might be, have repercussions. The G is the greed, where you're actually very, very greedy. Okay. And you want, you're greedy for all the attention. You're greedy for, everything else that comes with it. The H is also the hope, right? And the hope, would be that, oh, I hope, by doing this is going to, lead to, better prospects for me. And I, like you mentioned, is the insecurity. So it's the E, F, G, H, I. And I think that comes into play for a lot of people as well.
It does. It makes a lot of sense, actually. Another thing I want to bring up is the boys' club. So I have this person in top management at a multinational company. And she was like, whenever there's a group of men, you will find them just gravitating towards each other. That leads to a lot of division. That leads to exclusion of the woman. Because you really actually see fewer women at the top. And that's a fact. And what happens is that, they go drinking together, they, automatically have more in common, and they go golfing together and drinking together and this and that. And the woman does feel excluded. Again, it depends on what kind of men they are in that. You can have very, very decent men, and you can have people who are insecure, envious, wants to exclude people. She was telling me a story about this friend of hers who was the only woman in a room full of men. It was a conference that they were having. And she actually came out in tears because it was so negative and toxic towards her.
Sure.
So these things also happen. Yes, there are places where women are very, they fit in seamlessly into the boys' club, but generally you find that there is an exclusion. So there's that. Like, what would you say?
Again, it boils down to the culture of the organization. There are some countries that have this. I mean, even as a country, like when you look at Japan, it's almost like mandatory for the women to come out drinking with the guys, and they look down upon to a pretty large extent. Even and that's kind of almost culture there. Similarly, like I said, organizations, it's just part of the environment that what is this girl doing here, and she has no business to be here. And I think
Even
it's
if you're more competent than most of them, but still.
Oh, for sure. But then it's just been this thing, right? I mean, I guess if you move in India, if you move towards, the northeastern states where it's more matriarchal, that's probably the other way around. Like the women probably go drinking and they beat the guy up, right? But I'm just saying
Not really.
that, yeah, I'm just
I
saying
mean, you don't
it's
have to
also,
beat a
I
guy,
know, and by I mean, like not beat, but, emotionally and verbally beat as well. So,
You
it's,
don't have to have violence.
yeah. So I'm just saying that, there are cases where it's also like a cultural thing. But again, in an organization, one has to be mindful of that. I mean, there have been cases where I have encouraged people, not to be drinking together. Because sometimes the side that comes out of someone, after they've had a few drinks can be quite different. I mean, can be quite detrimental. I often hear people say that, oh, this is my friend, or these are my friends, and hence it's okay to have an extra drink. I tell people, listen, dude, if your capacity is like 4 drinks, stop at 3. Because in case you cross the line and you make an ass of yourself, you're dead, right? Because now you're going to be
They're never going to
typecast.
look at you the same
Of
again.
course, the
next
respect's
day.
gone. You're going to be typecast as someone, who, cannot, keep themselves together, as someone who is not trustworthy, as someone, who may have the wrong intentions. So all of that's actually going to start happening. And I think at work, you have to be very mindful, I mean, if it's about, being social, have a drink, maybe 2, but know where to draw the line. I think that's very important as well. And this works both for guys and for girls. So I think that aspect is very
Yes,
important too.
one has to be very careful. You go out drinking with, your colleagues and you're really good. You feel that, you're really relaxed because you spend so much time with them.
Right.
And then you end up doing something and then, they're going to be talking about it forever.
Yeah.
Right? They're really going to be talking about it forever.
Yeah.
And you don't know who your friend is and who is not your friend because, I mean, it only takes one incident to make everybody, people love to pounce on your weakness. And this is what happens. So be very careful.
Yeah. I think another aspect that is, very important is, and this is again coming from manager's perspective or a boss's perspective, is that when someone is repeatedly, not performing and, you trying to work with them and trying to fix them up, I think don't scream at them in public, right? So I always believe that, reward and recognition, that should be vocal, that should be, in front of everyone. But if you do have a grouse with someone and you have something that you want to, like really convey to them strongly, do it as far as possible in private.
Yeah.
So criticize privately, reward and, acknowledge publicly. I think that's a big mistake that people make. They do the opposite.
They do the opposite.
Some people will not even acknowledge, or reward or any incentivize and all that at all. Again, that probably comes from maybe a deep, insecurity, having a bad boss, themselves who never did it, and hence they will never do it. So, some of it comes from there as well. But they're very vocal when they're blowing people up, and I think that's a disaster.
So this person in top management was telling me about one of her bosses who she was the pillar of that unit. But he would never give her due credit when he was talking about her and her work outside. She's like, it's how they speak about you, your performance. It's how they express to people outside about you. And it was never acknowledging her worth. But she, in private, he would be like, I can't do without you. Without you, this entire unit would fall apart. And as a result, that's also quite demoralizing.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of brings us back to, even the first question that you started with, like, is it okay or can you have friendships at work? I think, there can be mutual respect for each other. There can be admiration for each other. There doesn't necessarily have to be, let's just say, showing your emotional weaknesses, etc. Because at a point, it can potentially be used against you as well. Suppose there's a
Absolutely.
situation in an organization, right?
See, because you're
coming
always
head to
in
head.
competition. Because you're
Exactly.
this is not a no strings relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're competing at all times with everybody in your organization.
Yeah.
So
True that. And people will use that against you at some point. Maybe it might pop up in an appraisal or a conversation with HR or a conversation with the boss. Do you know this person has XYZ issue? And then all of a sudden, then they're being typecast in that particular place.
another thing is resentment over salaries. Everyone's like, oh, I'm getting this much, I'm getting that much. When you're feeling very happy and you think you made a close friend, you don't know what kind of resentment that brings up. So please don't discuss personal issues, don't discuss your deep dark secrets, and don't discuss your salaries with people.
Yeah.
Because that creates a lot of disharmony. And I've seen it. Only HR should know your salary, nobody else.
And maybe accounting if they're releasing it. But yeah.
And accounting. Yeah. So another thing she brought up is language. The weaponization of language in an organization. So this person was talking about how, in her company, you have people from different communities, and then a majority, and we've seen it in a lot of companies, where you have a majority of people from one particular community. It could be any. Immediately they'll start talking in their own language.
Of course.
That again is so isolating, right? So that is one thing. And this person was telling me that, at the top level, they got in some very senior expats. And at the top level, you have the Indians talking in Hindi. And this expat is the only person in the room who has joined your company at a very, very senior level position, who's being excluded. That is just so wrong.
Yeah.
This is like school politics.
But there is a solution to that as well, right?
What?
The Meta AI glasses, where they have immediate translation of any language while it's being spoken. So AI is going to actually bring that to an end as well. So you can be talking in any language, and Meta, you should be sponsoring this podcast, by the way. Would actually go ahead and live convert that to the language that you understand.
Yeah. So then again, okay, so the language is one part of it also. So that was, I thought, it happens everywhere.
Of course. Again, maybe have more people, more diversity. And sometimes I think it's quite strange when there's an organization that says, oh, we're not hiring from a particular, community or minority group. I think that's unfortunate.
It is.
And also, again, boils down to the insecurity, piece of an organization. But again, it's all about culture again.
Yeah. So another thing is when, you have a boss and they're really encouraging you and they'll give you wings to fly, but up to a certain point. And the minute you get a better offer or you want a promotion, they try to suppress you because they don't want you leaving the team, because without you, the team would fall apart. Yeah. So that's another thing where, you're given all the support as long as you're under me. But the minute I'm given an opportunity to grow, I'm not going to allow that, because he or she is not going to allow that, because that means you're going to ruin the dynamics of the team.
And I think that's detrimental to an organization. I always say, when you hire someone who's smarter than you in that particular domain, right? And if they are willing to, just fly and blow it up, encourage them. Again, but it comes from, lack of, confidence, insecurity. I think always keeps boiling down, to that aspect as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to, not have that. In fact, I always tell people, I said, between entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, I'm like, take a person who's good at something, give them a division, give them a department, let them fly, let them, become like the top creators in that particular, department or division. Who knows what it's going to lead to? That's how big companies scale. That's how an Apple became an Apple or a Microsoft became a Microsoft. If you're going to be beating them down and saying, "Mere se bada koi nahi ho sakta, boss," tab to ho gaya aapka kaam.
Yeah, that's the main thing about, a team that is doing brilliantly. It's because they have a manager who's allowing them to shine.
Yeah.
And the team where the manager takes all the credit, you'll find they're so disheartened. And they're like, why do I need to put in that effort?
True
If
that.
it's not going to get acknowledged, so then why should I be working so hard?
Yeah.
For somebody who's going to take all the credit anyway.
Yeah. And I think there's some people I've seen who are really good at this, where they will take someone, and they will give them all the spotlight. They will give them, all the appreciation, and they really nurture them. and then you see this, little boy or little girl, and then you can't believe that in a few years, they actually turned out to be like, the Superman or the Superwoman of that organization. There's even a picture somewhere. If I find it, we'll put on the pod as well, where there's this spotlight shining on this little, boy, and then you see like the shadow is actually Superman now, just because of the environment that allowed them, to grow and prosper.
You have to have faith in your own ability. So another person was saying that, who are the most insecure bosses? The ones who are not sure of their own talent, who know that this person's smarter than me, and you're doing everything then you can then to suppress.
And I was just thinking that I think, the greatest leaders also wear different hats. Like there's a time where you have to be, the leader that leads and is, all guns blasting, and just going out there and, and doing what needs to be done. When it's like, let's say, a crisis scenario, a warlike scenario, the guy has to just go in and lead and get things done, right? So that's, the leader who is, okay, just going out there and doing that stuff. Then you have sometimes, leaders that will join together. So like, okay, they're like, okay, we have managers and we need to join you and we need to make it happen together. I mean, from cricket terminology, look at how Dhoni would play cricket. Like Dhoni would be, I'm part of the boys and make it happen as well. And then
Like,
sometimes.
he was probably the best India captain we've ever had.
For sure. And I'll give you another really good cricket analogy after this as well. And then you've also got, sometimes you have leaders that abdicate. Okay, they're like, oh, I'm out playing golf right now and take care of everything. If something goes wrong, it's your head on the axe. Right. So you have different levels of, of leaders, and sometimes maybe you have to play different roles, as well. So I think the best leaders are people who actually go and they wear the different hats at different times based on what the situation, actually demands as well.
Yeah. I've seen that. I think my best bosses were the ones who were able to absorb the screaming that they got from their boss, but didn't take it out on us. Okay, in our organization, we didn't have that much hierarchy. We had the reporters, then we had the editors, and you had a bureau chief. The best bureau chiefs we had were two guys who would take the screaming and be like, oh my God, I got a yelling from this one. But it would not come down to us. And the worst ones were the ones who got the screaming and passed it out and just let everybody have it.
True that.
Because it's, you reach that level of authority, you need to be able to absorb a lot of stuff. You need to be able to, take whatever crap from your manager, but make sure that your team is supported.
100%. I mean, let's take another example. We spoke about cricket a short while back. Take another example. One Indian team, okay, which had almost the same composition, performed really badly, and the other one performed really well, all because of the guy who was leading them, right? And we're talking about Chappell first. So Chappell came in, and he took this Indian team, and there was politics, and there was fighting, and there was a whole bunch of stuff, and that team just went down to hell.
I mean, it was the worst performance in any World
For
Cup
sure.
ever, right?
Right. And then you have Gary Kirsten, okay, almost comes in, works with exactly the same team, but has a very different approach, okay, and that same team goes out and actually lifts the cup. So the point is that how could one person with the same resources, the same people, access to the same talent, okay, actually take everything and run into the ground, and another person actually take it to the pinnacle of cricket. So again, it's just an example
your strength of
of
character. It's just your decency. It's your strength of character, and it's your ability to lead. Like leadership qualities. I mean, you can be extremely qualified in everything you do, but you may not have leadership qualities.
True. Yeah, and sometimes I say that you can be a great executive, but you would be a really bad manager.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's just not your skill. It's not something that you need to be doing, and I think people should accept that rather than trying and doing something that they're going to do badly and pull down an entire organization. It's okay. Just say it's not for me.
True. And as a manager, I mean, do you think that more people should be complimenting their team members if they've done a good job, like publicly? Do you think that's done a little too less?
100%. I think always appreciate, in public. I think that initiatives where, reward and recognition
That's not
should
done
happen.
very often.
It's not. And, sometimes, people, again, they want to either grab the credit or they want to don't. Like, you will not believe, this is not one organization that I was actually hearing of where people are discouraged from even posting too much on social media because they might get poached. Now, that's just so sad. Okay. And here, we had an organization which is saying, okay, telling PR, take our team, take their stories, put them on press, let them actually. I mean, how insecure are you that you are actually feeling that if someone starts posting on LinkedIn, they might actually start showing up, with headhunters and you might lose them. I mean, what kind of organization are you building over
Again,
there, right?
based on insecurity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say always, show up to blow up. So take them, and blow them up. It'll give them wings
And
like you cannot
there are
imagine.
ways to retain employees.
course.
Just be good to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give them the ability to make their own decisions. Give them a lot of respect
Of course.
and give them the salary that they deserve, and you've got it. And give them a feeling that there is more to come, that they're going to have a stake in the company at some point in time,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
what will
I
keep
think the,
them
the
going.
bigger picture, is very important. I mean, if someone's just doing it for the money, they're a mercenary, right? And mercenaries will never stick. I mean, someone will always give them a better deal and then they'll just walk away. You don't want mercenaries. What you want are people who believe in the vision and the mission of the organization. They have that buy-in and they will turn down, all the money in the world just by virtue of, building what you're building together with them.
And so when somebody comes to you with a problem, how do you know whether it's genuine or fake? How do you address it? And give me one instance of how you have handled a really big issue that has come up.
Sure. So let's take the first part where you mentioned about, is it an authentic, genuine issue or is it something that's just been blown out of proportion or reacted? Because obviously how you're going to react is going to have an impact on the lives and, careers of, all the stakeholders involved. So one is always, of course, listen. That's very, very important. Acknowledge. I think that's very, very important. Validate. And the validation, of course, is one with them but then also checking with certain other stakeholders who may have been in touch with that particular person against who these complaints are coming, that is this actually a genuine thing? And if multiple people are coming and saying the same thing at that point when that conversation is happening, now you have a problem. So listen, acknowledge, validate, and of course then act. That would be lava, LAVA. Right, so lava is your template now, in case you didn't already know that. So,
Another bright gem from Gaurav Bhagat.
all right. So listen, acknowledge, validate, and act. I think that's very important. And then the other one that you mentioned, where you said that what kind of steps would you actually take in this case? I mean, I've had to take hard decisions. It's been sometimes with family. It's been sometimes with people who were good people. They were great at their work, but it was just not aligning with whom we stood as or for as an organization. And you have a hard conversation. You let them know what happened. I would again warn first. I would have multiple people kind of warn them. So maybe it'll be a manager that they report to or someone else as well. Again, the reboot or the boot. Eventually it boils down to the fact that you just have to let them go, and maybe there is a better role for them in another company, just not with us.
Do you think that you have fostered an environment of openness where people feel comfortable enough to come to you with issues?
I think there are certain people who do feel that way, and they do know that they can approach me. There are certain others who just feel that it would be, inappropriate, and they probably wouldn't. To whom I would say, come and speak. Like I said, my doors are always open. If there is a genuine issue and it should be addressed. Today, I mean, I've come from a one-person organization to a 80 people organization, but I truly believe that we will have 1,000 people plus at some point across many countries and cities. We need to continue to build that strong foundation, because if the foundation is weak, everything comes crashing down.
That's great. All the best for that.
All right, and there you have it. So workplace dynamics, relationships, not all bad, not all good. It is sometimes like a roller coaster, but I think what we try to bring out in this conversation is just that some things that exist, what can you do about it? And again, I think it all boils down, to communication, and always know this, that there is always an alternative out there. Don't just be stuck and believe that, oh, the economy is tough and things will never work out. Da, da, da. I mean, just go out there and you never know how it's really going to work out. That's just me. Any parting thoughts from your side?
I would say that if you're in a company where you're not happy, have a chat with somebody who will listen to you and will either guide you or will address the issues that you have. It's very important to have that conversation. And if you're being picked on, if you're being talked about, you can talk to safe people about it or look for something else.
Sounds like a plan. And on that note, remember, do follow this podcast, do share this podcast. Lots of exciting topics coming up. Don't forget to drop us an email as well. Our email ID is down in the comments too. And looking forward to seeing you soon on episode 10.